Ready? Welcome to Speak the Truth in Love with Clint Day from St. Simon's Island, Georgia, on WCGA 1100 AM, where we do speak the truth in love based on God's Word in Ephesians 4:15. In today's woke PC culture, there are many forces that want to stop free speech, especially for people of faith. Good men and women must be willing to get involved and stand up for their faith and be the salt and light to preserve our freedom. True freedom comes from faith in Jesus Christ. In John 8:32, God's Word says, "The truth will set you free." Today, I welcome you, friends, and I'd like to welcome a good new friend, Lee Price. Lee, it's great to have you here.
Thank you, sir.
It's so good to be with you, and I know there's a lot of background in your career and your story of overcoming a lot of odds and going back and getting an accounting degree and now being in the accounting business. And it's just amazing. You also have a book. I just want to go ahead and give the opportunity. Let's tell the audience about your books real quick, because I want to make sure if they decide they want to get them, they can get them.
All right. Well, there's two books. The first one is called To Live as Christ. This book here is basically a 12-week Bible study designed for those people who are lost, maybe seeking who they are, their identity, but then it takes you to the next step once you are introduced to Christ, and it helps you discover who you are in Christ. Then it helps you understand who Christ is in you, to help you find your calling and move into your calling. And this book here is called With Passionate Longing. This book is a 52-week devotional on the Lord's Supper. And it's designed to rekindle your fire by getting back into the Lord's Supper like it was intended to be, without getting too bored with it, too routine, too religious, too bored with it. So you just stop doing it.
Exactly. It kind of becomes a routine as opposed to the spiritual side of that relationship that we're building here with Christ.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
So there's a fresh new devotional for every week of the year, and it has a 3-step application at the end to meditate, appropriate, and activate that part of your relationship with Christ.
That's good.
So it helps keep the Lord's Supper fresh for once a week through the whole year.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. And again, you have an incredible story, and I'm just going to ask you, if you will, just go ahead and share with our audience your story.
Okay, well, I guess I should begin with saying I literally had to lose my life to find it. As far back as I can remember, in Spokane, Washington, me and 4 siblings, I had 3 brothers and a sister, and my mom, she was divorced, and so we were dirt poor. We lived in the ghetto, and just trying to survive. We were, wearing hand-me-down clothes, pretty rough neighborhood for a little white guy like me, and but we went through it. At some point, my mom met this guy. His name was Dick Ames, and he was a biker, and not just any biker. This guy was a little crazy. His name of his biking group was called the Uncouth, which means they were uncivilized, ill-mannered is what the word means. And these guys they were rowdy, they were alcoholics, and they were atheists. So before this, when I was about 4 or 5, I suppose, before he entered into our home, Mom, I can remember one time at least she took me to an Assemblies of God church. So my mom had at least some type of faith.
And where has she grown up?
My mom was born and raised in Arkansas,
okay,
the Ozark Mountains.
So she was in the South. She had that biblical heritage, because in the South, it used to be very politically correct to be involved with the church. Now it's not so much. It still is well accepted in the South, but other parts of the country have a little different attitudes sometimes. But go ahead.
Yes, sir. So this guy, he entered into the house and introduced not only atheism, but my mom really started to drink heavy at this time. And they were, big into country music. My mom liked to sing Harper Valley PTA and things like that. So this environment continued to evolve into just a bust out party just about every day of the week, which involved fighting. The gang, the motorcycle gang, would come back to the house and talk about the gunfight or the fist fight they had down the road.
Wow.
Things like that. And so we were kind of in this situation as kids, really looked up to this guy named Dick. You know, we called him Dad, and we admired him. He's our good stepdad. But he was lost himself, and so he imparted to us the only thing he knew, which was evolution. He was really sold out on evolution and had such an impact on the family. We bought a hook, line, and sinker. So later on in high school, I studied evolution, and they taught it in school as fact at the school I was at. So I was double brainwashed into believing in evolution. So that mindset and that environment brought all 5 of us kids into a lifestyle of drinking and partying, and to the point where we thought it was the normal thing. Just like everybody did it. This is how it is. And at some point, it just started getting out of control.
Right. About how old were you when you started drinking?
I would say 13 or 14.
Right.
I started smoking cigarettes, exploring like 10 years old, and got caught a couple times and stopped. But at 12 years old, I was literally allowed to smoke in front of my parents. I went to Dick and asked my mom. She says, "Go ask him." He said, "You know, it'd give you cancer, right?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I ain't buying them." I said, "I know." He says, "Here, have a good cigarette." He hands me a Pall Mall non-filter. So that was 12 years old, Spokane, Washington, and
Was he from Washington? Was Dick
he was from Montana.
Montana?
Yeah, I was born in Illinois,
Gotcha.
and we moved when I was around 3 or 4 to Oregon.
Your parents went through a divorce, I assume?
They went through a divorce. My mom remarried a guy from the Navy in Oregon, and that didn't work long. And then we moved from Oregon to Spokane, Washington, just before the first grade.
Right. What kind of career was your mom in?
She never worked. She was maybe the 3rd grade she went through. She couldn't hardly read. She couldn't hardly write. So she never worked. So we was on welfare.
Oh, okay.
Again, barely getting by. And so when she met this guy, you know, he was able to come in and help a lot in the financial area.
Right. What kind of career did he have?
He was in a heating and air conditioning.
Okay.
He was real good at it. He was done it for a long time, so very successful at it. But him and his motorcycle gang, they were into all kinds of stuff that we didn't even know about.
Right. What kind of stuff were they into?
Well, like I said, you know, they'd come back and talk about fights or gunfights. I don't think they ever robbed things or anything, but they went to the bars. One guy was Big Dave. He must have been 6'8", 6'9", just a monster, a giant. But he was just a gentle giant, real sweet to us.
Yes.
But I wouldn't want to cross him these days in a bar somewhere, you know.
Exactly.
So Dick was a good, like I said, a nice guy while he was drinking, while he wasn't drinking, but he could get pretty rowdy when he was drinking.
Exactly. All right, so there was a lot of, I assume, confusion in your home. Was there turmoil, or were things pretty calm there?
Well, it wasn't never calm. But it became such a norm to us because of all the drinking and the different people coming in and out of the house. This was almost on a daily basis. So we grew up. I went through grade school there. Eventually moved somewhere else to go to junior high. I played a little bit of cornet and tried my wrestling out for 1 year. But right about 14 is when I started getting into the drugs, skipping the school, and we started partying. We were one of those 1960, 1970 hippies with long hair, freaky people.
Exactly. So what got you into that? Was it peer pressure? What was it?
Well, my older brother, Danny, I had a Danny and I had Walt. Walt was a real easygoing guy. He mainly just drank. He was a real quiet guy. But my brother Denny, he was like 6'2". He was my hero. He got into the drugs first, and then little brother follows big brother, type thing. He would never have anything to do with me while I was 12 or 13, and then he went off to the Navy. But when he came back after 2 years, it was like he was a totally different person. He looked at me like I was a grown-up, said, "Come on, let's go." So he would take me to rock concerts, keg parties, and I would mingle in with him and his friends. He was like 3 or 4 years older than I was.
Yeah. I know when I was in the middle of that myself, I always tried to keep my brothers from it. My older brother was more of a partier, but my 2 younger brothers, I just was like, I don't want them to do this, because I really knew that I didn't want to be in that. Of course, I grew up in fortunate to grow up in a more Christian home, clearly a Christian home. And so I had that influence in the right direction, if you will. And so it was one of those things that I just, especially for me, marijuana, I just did not want them doing that. Because again, for me, it was not something I could just do and then be done with it. It became more of an addiction. And that's what's always scary, is you don't ever know that first toke, that first drink, that first line of cocaine or whatever somebody does. You don't know which drug the devil's going to use to get you trapped. And it's amazing, everybody starts off innocent, and you see all these great commercials for beer and wine or whatever, and everybody's looking like they're having such a fun time, but you don't see the side of that leads to real difficult times. And obviously people making bad mistakes, making bad choices. And as we all know, it doesn't take long. It can take a long time to build a good reputation, but it doesn't take but just a minute to destroy it, especially with alcohol or drugs involved. And so,
Right.
again, I am so grateful that it was one of those things I knew I did not want to do. And of course, to you, it was normal, and that's okay too, because that's how, it's not okay, but I mean, that's how God allowed you to live, so you could relate to certain people that grew up in those environments, and your story can help change their lives.
Sure.
And it really is an amazing thing we do. We're going to take a quick break. This is Clint Day from St. Simon's Isle. We'll be right back. Sorry, went a little too long. Okay.
That's okay.
All right, so good. All right, so what do you want to make sure we cover?
From here, probably want to begin with more partying.
Okay,
and
let's go there.
And
Okay,
then,
ready? Welcome back to Speak the Truth and Love with Clint Day from St. Simon's Island, Georgia. I'm here today with Lee Price. It's really a great pleasure to have you here, Lee. And we were talking about the story of just that partying aspect that we sometimes get into when we find ourselves, where are you going with this? Okay, so tell us more about that story as a teenager growing up in that environment.
yeah, like I said, when my brother Denny came back from the Navy, he took me under his wing and really pulled me into the world of partying. I mean, heavy partying, 2-3 day binges, and that, like you said on the commercials, it looks fun and adventurous, and everybody's having a great time, and we did. It seemed fun.
Well, I did. I had fun. Let's just face it.
But
For a
while, yeah,
Headaches.
we got so deep into it.
Yes.
I did. Most of my family turned out to be alcoholics. 2 of my brothers died. My hero died at 35 years old, cirrhosis of the liver. He drank and drugged himself to death.
Mm-hmm.
And then my oldest brother, Walt, was 45 and died of a massive stroke that was alcohol related.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still here today by the grace of God that I didn't go down that same road.
Yes.
But so the party and everything continued to escalate and elevate, and by the time I'm 15 years old, my mom wants to get a clean break, get away from Dick, and move to Arkansas. So another guy that we knew, a friend of the family, said, "I'll take y'all." And his old, I think it was a 65 Rambler, one of those old station wagons. And so he loaded up my mom and all 5 of us kids and drove us all the way to Mountain Home, Arkansas. And that's where my mom was from, Mountain View. And we tried to start off a new life there. So I dropped out of 9th grade in Spokane And when we got the mountain home, I decided that I needed to take care of myself. So I moved in with my sister and her husband and started working at a shirt factory.
So at 15 years old, you were working in a shirt factory.
Yes.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And I probably lied to him, told him I was 18. I can't remember,
Yeah.
but that was my first job. And I got me a dog named Cochise. He was part wolf and part shepherd.
Wow.
And my sister's husband was a big partier too. So no matter where I went, there was partying going on. And again, the lifestyle was just like the normal thing to do. So I went from there, and I eventually went from Arkansas, moved to Kansas for a little while with my uncle and did some roofing, and met a Filipino girl there, and left, and she got pregnant, and so I went back, tried to get her to marry me. She decided not to marry me because she was smart. By then, I was already on my way to, drinking too much. I was
Yeah.
like 17.
Right.
And then I moved back to Illinois, where my brothers lived, and continued the partying. Eventually, I moved to Florida and met a girl, and we decided we were going to get married and move to Texas. So we went from Florida to Texas in 1982, where my oldest brother ended up building fence. Now, the fence business was in the family for a long time.
Sure.
So we went to Bryan College Station, where Texas A&M is, and started to build fence. And the whole crowd.
And you're about how old?
Now I'm 22.
Okay.
And some of the old crowd from Spokane, Washington was there. They had the fence business there. Now they were in Bryan College Station. So we all kind of knew each other. So I got a job from the same guy that drove us to Arkansas a few years earlier, gave me a job building fence. So I started doing that, but he was a real drinker too. He stayed in the bar. So terrible me went to the bar after work every night instead of going home to my pregnant wife.
Mm-hmm.
And Scott's just smashed, come home drunk every night, go to work, do the same thing every day. I'm just terribly ashamed of that.
Yeah.
The drinking turned to liquor after a while, and blackouts, and I'd say and do things that were absolutely unacceptable,
Sure.
and wake up and be told about it after a blackout, and I just couldn't believe anybody in my family or friends would continue to have anything to do with me because I was such a mess. I was 10 foot tall, bulletproof, thought I could fight anybody on liquor, and made some really terrible choices and things while I was under the influence of alcohol. So again, that lifestyle began fun and free and adventurous, but after a while an addiction took root, and that addiction began to control me. And I got to the place in my life where it was so uncontrollable I would wake up with the shakes.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. That just means you have to have some more alcohol to settle down, right?
That's right. I had to start my day with 2 or 3 beers.
You know, I've been through like Living Well and other ministries, and I remember one time someone was talking about how they were getting ready to drive someone to rehab, and they were talking about how the process was going, and the person was just really starting to have the shakes. And instead of, in my mind, I'm going, don't give him any alcohol, don't give him any alcohol. She said, no, I went in and got him a beer, and he drank that beer, and he was able to settle down so he could get to the rehab program. Because again, you can literally die from withdrawals from alcohol.
Yeah.
People act like it's no big deal, and that's just not true. But it can really, it can be more difficult physically to come off alcohol than a lot of other drugs. And of course, this is amazing that people don't sometimes realize that. And again, the process of getting help in rehab, I know I went through it, it helped me a lot. At least I got educated that did not want to be there when I was 50. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, they were right in their calling of the things that I would go through. And so it's amazing how, when you go through like a rehab program like I did,
I thought it was going to my 1 month, 28 days, and I'd be okay. But what ended up happening is I ended up checking out early because I didn't want to. There was a weekend. Like the third weekend, you're supposed to get a free weekend and be able to go do what you kind of want to do. And I remember one guy that got out on his weekend. He worked for GM, General Motors, had a big plant in the North Atlanta area in Doraville, Georgia. And he was in a padded cell when he came back. He had been drinking MD 2020 all weekend. And he was down there in the hallway yelling and screaming and banging on the wall. You could hear the pads, him punching the walls. And this was the nicest guy when he wasn't drunk. He was super. I mean, it's like, I can't believe the same person was in that padded cell. And the bottom line, though, is he had been through so many programs. GM had helped him, and other people had tried to help him. And that addiction can just get you so bad. And I know in my case, I wanted to quit, but they were right. Within a couple of weeks when I got out, I was back into it like I never quit.
Yep.
And they were like, you're either going to be in a gutter, you're going to be smoking pot again, in my case, which is a gateway drug. And anybody that says it's not, it lowers your IQ, it lowers your motivation. That's 100% accurate. Always lowers your IQ, lowers your motivation. And in my case, and today, in our country, they're trying to tell us it's so easy, people can do it, you're just getting laid back. No, you're not. You're destroying your motivation, you're destroying your brain, and we really don't know scientifically the long-term effects. Of course, alcohol, we know a lot more. And so I know we had talked about before, and we'll talk about a little bit more as we go to the next part of our program. We're going to take another quick break here in a second. But I just really want to talk about, the desire maybe that you might have had to get off of it. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about that. We're going to take another quick break. This is Clint Day with Speak the Truth in Love. We'll be right back. Very good. Okay, ready to go?
I mean, I just need to. I get itchy here every now and then.
Sorry about that. Okay, ready to go?
Sure.
Okay. I didn't stop. I'm going to have to do something about that. That was my bad. Okay?
Okay.
Welcome back to Speak the Truth of Love with Clint Day from St. Simon's Island, Georgia. I'm here today with Lee Price, and we were just talking about, did you ever have any desire to go get help once you realized that you were an alcoholic?
Good point. Well, in my story, it took a while before I would actually admit that I had a problem.
Okay.
After in Dallas, we went from College Station to Dallas. I became partners with that guy building fence, and my wife had 2 more sons. So we had actually 4 sons born in Dallas, Texas. One of them died when he was 2 years old there, and that's a very tragic story there.
Yeah.
He was electrocuted on a shop fan. The cord was cut and taped up.
Yeah.
He pulled the tape off and killed him. So from there, we stayed there until about 1988, and the fencing started dying down. And so we moved to Cartersville, Georgia, and that's how we got to Georgia. And I started by the hour up there, and then he eventually became partners with the same guy and moved to Douglasville. And that's where it really started I was getting older, and I was starting to see, here I am. I don't have no cause, so I'm a lost cause. I'm trouble. Nobody wants to see me. They don't. When they see me coming, they say, "Here comes trouble."
Yes.
And that's when I started getting to the place where I was so empty. I had no identity, no purpose, no drive, no goals. I thought I came from a fish. Evolution. I didn't have the capacity to get a grip on reality of who I was.
Absolutely.
So,
and of course, we believe as people of faith, we're creating God's image. And there's a big difference between that than I came from a fish, or I came from a monkey, or I came from a gorilla, whatever. There's a big difference in I'm made in God's image. There's a big difference in that. But you had no concept of that.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, because for me, I was so insecure, zero self-esteem, that I was desperate to fit in somewhere, to feel accepted. And so I would do what everybody else did. I tried to get my identity from everyone else. You know, if my brother laughed, I laughed. If he slapped his leg, I slapped my leg. If he said, let's go trucking, I said, let's go trucking. Because I was trying to gain my identity from my brother, from my superstar, from the movie star.
Right.
So I was getting.
And you were a classic follower. Then you were just
Yeah.
following whoever you looked up to at the moment. And you were looking for the right one to follow, but you were always following the wrong guy, I guess, in a lot of ways.
And I wanted to fit in.
Yes.
And so I became a man with so
That
many
peer
different
pressure.
personalities.
Yes.
I didn't have my own identity.
Wow. Yeah.
So I got to the place where,
How did you feel about that? How would you feel about that lack of identity?
well, that insecurity was part of the reason I drank. I believe later I came to the realization that I would drink to numb the ache that was formed in my heart from the lack of true meaning.
Yeah.
I had no meaning in life. And so I would just medicate myself, my feelings, my hurt, my lost condition, because I didn't know any other way to cope with it. And so that compelled me and propelled me even deeper and deeper into alcoholism. I did a lot of drugs, but alcohol really had a grip on me. So at 32 years old, now I'm in Douglasville, Georgia, been married for 10 years, I came to the place, okay, I need help. I need help. At that time, I had no idea what AA was about. I thought it was a rehab center where you had to pay a bunch of money to go.
Mm-hmm.
So
And rehab is very expensive for a lot of
yes,
places.
it is. And I was barely making it, of course. I was drinking my money away more than I was doing saving, because I would go out and earn. We could make some pretty good money subcontracting. You know, if we would work all day, every day, we could probably make a couple thousand a week.
Mm-hmm.
But we were such drinkers, we had to be at the bar by 2. So we were only working 4 or 5 hours a day on the job.
Mm-hmm.
And then I pay the bills, buy the groceries, and the rest goes right here. Budweiser was my king.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I lived for. In this blurry realm of intoxication, that's all I could see forward to the next day, to make sure I made enough money to have my beer on the table. That's what drove me, and to take care of my wife and kids. But they almost came second to that
Wow.
beer.
Yep.
So that's when I came to say, okay, I even looked at my wife and I said, okay, I need help.
Yeah.
But by then, the damage was done.
Right. Now, what did you take any action to get help?
No. I admitted it, that I needed help. But see, I was in that place like, I can't afford it. I'm not making enough money, or I'm not willing to take the money, aside from the alcohol.
Right. What was
pay
your
for it.
wife saying to you?
Well, my wife was a sweet Christian girl when I met her. She still is a sweet lady. But eventually she started drinking. And so there was a lot of fighting going on in the house, drinking and partying and fighting in my house almost daily. And so there was the problem in the marriage as well because of that, because of the drinking. And so she knew I had a bad drinking problem, but she rarely would scold me or tell me, you need to go get help.
Right.
She was just a real quiet lady. She just sweet. She just quiet. And she knew me well enough to know I was going to do it when I was ready to do it anyway. So I decided.
Okay. We're going to take another quick break.
Okay.
This is Clint Day from St. Simon's Island, Georgia. Speak the truth in love. We'll be right back. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So you got it off?
Yeah, I got it off. I got it off this time. Thank you. But
I might be
anyway.
going a little bit too quick through the story.
Okay. You're doing good.
How many more segments are left?
2 7-minute segments.
Okay.
We're good. We're
Well,
good.
now that's just about right. So
Okay.
we need to move into.
Okay.
It's,
Okay. Let's go. I know
Okay.
where, and you think where you want to take it, you take it there. Okay.
Okay.
But I know what I'm going to say coming in. Okay. Welcome back to Speak the Truth in Love with Clint Day from St. Simon's Island, Georgia. I'm here today with Lee Price,
And Lee, we were just talking about, what was your wife saying? You had said she was a Christian. Was she ever trying to take the children to church or anything, or was she, and she'd kind of joined you in your in the partying side?
No, she may have tried a few times. She eventually got a job at McDonald's, became assistant manager, so she was real sharp. But she was kind of pulled into the group of friends. My best friend his name was Doug, and his wife and their kids, our kids, loved their kids, and we were like two couples that were like best friends. We just hung out like that. And so, but when I realized I had a problem and told her, look, I know I got a problem, the damage was done. About 2 weeks after that, her sister came down, who also lived coincidentally in Spokane, came down with a boyfriend, and they stayed with us a couple of days. And this one weekend, we had a pretty crazy party, and the other guy was having an argument with his girlfriend, my wife's sister. Well, my wife kind of got into the middle of that argument, and then he said something to my wife, and that was the wrong thing to do in my house.
Yes.
And that created a fist fight and just screaming, hollering. Pretty soon I said, all right, everybody out. I kicked everybody, including my wife, because then she started screaming at me. So I kicked everybody out, all the kids, everybody get out. Well, we lived in this big trailer park, and we had some friends, 3 or 4 trailers down. My wife would go to every blue moon when she knew she didn't need to be around me.
Right.
And so they all went down there and spent the night. And like I said, this happened before. I'm thinking, okay. So the next morning I wake up thinking, okay, she'll be back, like always. She always comes back. Now, let me pause to say that by this time she had already left me 3 or 4 times and went down to Florida where her mom lives. And I would drive down there and beg her and beg her and beg her to come home. I promise I'll quit. And I did. I genuinely tried to quit on my own several times. And I would do good for a couple of 3 days, start getting the shakes, and back to it I went. I just couldn't break free from that addiction, and that itself drove me crazy.
Right. When you would start having those shakes, that the addiction was so strong, and you'd have those shakes, what was your thought process? Do I go get help, or the easiest help is just to take a drink?
Well, I can remember thinking, how do I break free of this? How do I do it? And without spending thousands and thousands of dollars. And I was in a hopeless situation where I had no answers, no solution to my problem. So that next morning I woke up thinking she was coming back, and she didn't. So I get with my friend down the parking lot, or down the trailer park, and ask him, have you seen my wife? He says, yeah, they're gone. And I said, where'd they go? And he said, they left. They left the country. They left the city. And I'm like, well, where did they go? And he said, I think they went to Spokane, Washington. Now, if you do the math, from Douglasville, Georgia, near Atlanta, to Spokane, Washington.
That's the opposite end of the country.
A long way. And here I got a 1976 Ford 1-ton truck, a fence truck. There's no way I would have dared to drive that far. I'd run down there to Florida, but not to Washington State. So that day, when she left, my world ended. Now, I am a utter mess. A indescribable mess. I'm already waking up with the shakes. I'm already in a place, blurry-minded. I can't think straight. She leaves. I honestly tried to quit for 2 or 3 days, begging her, calling her to come home. She refused. I went right back to drinking, but this time full force. I just couldn't cope. Pretty soon, when I was convinced she wasn't coming back, I gave everything away: washers, dryers, furniture, clothes, everything. I got down to 1 box of clothes and some tax-deductible receipts. That was all I had left. And wherever I passed out, That's where I spent the night. It might be in my truck. It might be at my best friend Doug's house, or it might be my brother's couch. I just couldn't handle it. I couldn't get a grip on life apart from my wife and kids. And so I missed them terribly, and I just couldn't move forward.
Right. What age were your children?
5, 6, and 7-year-old boys.
Mm-hmm.
5, 6, and 7, just babies. And I did.
They
love
knew
my
what was
wife.
going on. They knew what was going on. They knew this was
Especially
not,
the oldest one.
Yes, they didn't. That was not good. It's amazing. I've got 5-year-old grandsons, and they really have a lot of awareness of what's going on. So that's a very difficult thing. But at the same time, so you loved your wife.
I love my wife and my sons.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, my oldest son, I was told later, he kept running away,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get back to Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a terrible, terrible circumstance I put my wife and children in. And so this went on for 7 months, and she was gone. She wouldn't come back. It was so bad that I had a brother that owned half that truck,
Mm-hmm.
that fence truck. So we were all fence builders. He's the one that trained me,
Mm-hmm.
and we hired employees to help us build the fence.
Mm-hmm.
So it got so bad that I was the only one with the driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to transport
Right.
or go broke.
Right.
You need to take a break.
Yeah. We're going to take a break in just a second. Go ahead, real quick.
And so it got so bad where I would have to drive them to the job. They'd all get out of the truck and work. Well, I sat there in my truck and tried to
Oh, my
drink
goodness.
away my self-pity.
Well, we'll take another quick break. This is Clint Day from Speak the Truth in Love. We'll be right back. Wow. That's amazing. You ready? Welcome back to Speak the Truth in Love with Clint Day from St. Simon's Island, Georgia. I'm here today with Lee Price, and he's telling the really difficult time of his story of his wife's left with the children, and he and his brother are, trying to make a business work, and he's organizing men and getting them to do jobs, but then all of a sudden you're finding yourself, you're not even wanting to go to work, you're just wanting to drink.
That's right. Yeah, I got so bad I couldn't deal with it emotionally or mentally. I was so limited in my capacity to deal with life, because I believe because of my roots, because I didn't really grow up with my dad. I know a lot of people use that as an excuse, but I had nobody really to point me in the right direction, to mentor me, to encourage me to do the right thing and go in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
So I was lost. I was alone. Self-pity was just demonic. It was just eating me up, but I didn't realize it was demonic, and I just couldn't deal with it. So this goes on for 7 months. 7 months goes by. I'm in a delirious state of mind. I'm barely surviving. My brother's barely surviving. I'm forcing him to leave the jobs early because I'm drinking so much in the truck while they're working. But we got to go before I got too much to drink and can't drive.
Mm-hmm.
And so his paycheck, which he's still splitting with me, went smaller and smaller and smaller. It was getting ridiculous. The owner of the company we were subcontracting from were looking at us like, all right, y'all got to get it together.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right around Super Bowl Sunday comes around. It was February 2nd, 1993 is the exact day. And we was at my best friend's house having a big party. It was me, Doug, his wife, and 5 kids, and a couple of friends. And we got smashed. I mean, liquor, schnapps, beer. I don't think there was any drugs. And it's still blurry in my remembrance, but there's a lot of pieces and stuff we can put together on the next show. But at some point, evidently, it was time for me to go. So me and another guy got in my 1-ton truck, and we was heading to Austell, where my brother's apartment was. I was going to go sleep on his couch. And on Bankhead Highway, which goes right along I-20 between Six Flags and Atlanta area, we was going around this long curve, this bend in the road, and it was a 55-mile-an-hour road. And my decisions, my choices led to massive destruction, irreparable damage, unremovable remorse. We ran head on with another car. We was in my 1-ton flatbed truck. They were in a little bitty Chevy Citation. 55 mile an hour both ways was a disaster. The 1-ton truck stopped the other car in its tracks, backed it up, and then rolled over into the ditch.
Wow.
The result was massive destruction.
Okay, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about that. We got about three and a half minutes here.
Okay?
So just talk a little bit more about that.
In the other car, the driver was 19 years old, 8 months pregnant. Her and her baby were killed instantly. I want to say drinking and driving kills. Next to her in the front seat, the passenger side, was her sister, 18 years old, 2 teenagers. She was also just got pregnant. Most people didn't even know. She was in a coma for 26 days. Then her and her baby died. In the back seat, same car, was a 38-year-old lady that was like a stepmom to the 2 sisters. It crushed every bone in her face. It shattered a leg, broken arm. She got brain damage, barely survived. Multiple surgeries, barely survived. Still suffers today. Next to her was a 4-year-old baby boy. He had broken legs, some broken fingers, cuts on his face, but his mom was in the front seat. Next to him was about a 9-month-old baby girl strapped in a car seat. Now, I got to stop and say that other car was mangled, caught on fire, doors are jammed, and this little girl made it out without a scratch. Miraculous.
Praise God.
Meanwhile, in my truck, I come to in the floorboard, and I'm like, what in the world just happened? And it was found out later, we'll talk about it in the next show, that somebody was with me that jumped out of the truck and ran. This mystery guy. We didn't know who it was, but couldn't figure out who this person was. Wow.
So, again, that's going to be leading to incredible challenges, I mean, to say the least. I mean, we all have warning signs. We have warning signs that God's trying to get our attention. You know, we've lost our family, we've lost our job maybe, or we're losing working with a certain contractor or whatever. And we don't sometimes hear the warnings. And I just want to encourage everybody out there, if God's warning you, start listening to what he's telling you to do.
Right.
We want to really pay attention because, again, a lot of times our behavior, especially if it's in the wrong direction, it'll just get worse and worse. And finally, God allows things to happen. And I'm not going to say he makes them happen by any means, but he allows things to happen that really get our attention. Really a period of brokenness, which can lead to great things, but obviously it's very painful for what you've had to go through. And I just want to say thank you very much, friends, for listening to us today. I want to thank you, Lee, for joining me to Speak the Truth in Love with Clint Day on WCGA 1100 AM from St. Simons Island, Georgia. Remember, every day is a God day.